Alright, folks. We're back. We're going to get into the second article here. This article was written by a different author, a different reporter, if you will, who chose, as any author of an article can do, to tell it from their perspective and use their language outside of any direct quotes referred to. This author used some extremely colorful language to tell the same story as the New York Times article reported on, in several cases even highlighting the same researchers, James Swanson and Martine Hugman. Give me a sec. I had to load some icky sticky to get through this article because, wow. Number one, it's long. Number two, it's got a lot of information in it. So I want to just get right to the reading and not waste any time. It starts off, says, this is from Blaze Media, by the way. After long suggesting ADHD has biological basis, scientists now make stunning admission. Okay. Right there, right out the word gate. Right out of the gate, right from the word go, it's Pandora's box instantly opened, because they didn't say they make a stunning new discovery. They said they make a stunning admission. In other words, they come clean. They tell the truth. ADHD is apparently an unclassifiable, unmeasurable disorder that requires costly amphetamines to remedy. The medical establishment has a troubling track record of confidently stating things that just aren't so, as became clear to Americans who suffered injuries from supposedly safe and effective medicines during the pandemic. We're not going to get into that. We're going to keep reading. There was a damning admission in the New York Times Magazine over the weekend that may inspire new doubts about the credibility of the so-called experts advising the masses on matters of health, namely that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder may not have a basis in biology after all. In layman's terms, it may not have a basis in something that's treatable with medication. That admission was not volunteered from some activist or critic, but rather by the Dutch neuroscientist who apparently misled the world into thinking ADHD is a disorder of the brain. Not found wrong data, not inaccurate research, misled. Again, lied to. I warned you that the language in this article was very crucial. Goes on to say, in a piece titled, "Have We Been Thinking About ADHD All Wrong?" This was the first article I referenced. Paul Tuff discussed the correlated explosion of ADHD diagnoses and Ritalin prescriptions in the 1990s, a trend, he noted, that was accompanied by criticism from parents and others concerned about the apparent campaign to load kids with methylphenidate and amphetamines. Now, okay, granted, I get that this was in the 90s. We didn't know in the 90s what we know about amphetamines today. But let's keep in mind that that's exactly what drugs like Ritalin are. They're pharmaceutical grade meth. Goes on to say, you didn't have to be a Scientologist to acknowledge that there were some legitimate questions about ADHD, stated Tuck. Despite Ritalin's rapid growth, no one knew exactly how the medication worked or whether it really was the best way to treat children's attention issues. Okay, didn't really know if it was the best way to treat these issues. However, they decided that it was. They didn't know if it was, but they decided it was. History shows us that. Looking back in hindsight, Ritalin was decided to be the go-to treatment. So if they didn't know it was the best, what prompted them to decide it was the best? Parents were right to be concerned. Ritalin, Adderall, and the other highly addictive stimulants foisted upon hard-to-control American youth have a variety of undesirable side effects, both immediate and long-term. In the short term, they can cause side effects such as bladder pain, bloody urine, an irregular heartbeat and palpitations, diarrhea, headaches, joint pain, trouble sleeping, confusion, agitation, seizures, and vomiting. In the long term, these drugs can apparently impact growth, dopamine regulation, and memory formation and retention, and cause elevated blood pressure, psychosis, and mood disorders. Trap Cat, you leave the camera alone. That is not part of production's job. Now, that's a lot of potential side effects. Even though they're potential, that's a lot. And a lot of them are pretty serious, especially considering it was the youth that was targeted. Over the past decade, prescriptions for stimulants to remedy imagined ADHD have skyrocketed by 58% between 2012 and 2022. Most of the drugs dished out have been amphetamines, according to a 2023 document prepared for the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Administration. So, you got no problem admitting that you're pumping our kids full of fucking meth. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, an estimated 7.1 million American children, approximately 1 out of every 9, aged 3 through 17, had an ADHD diagnosis as of 2022. That's up from 2 million in the mid-90s. Over half of the children currently diagnosed with ADHD receive at least one ADHD medication. In layman's terms, Big Pharma found a very deep well of potentially lifelong customers for a drug that's highly addictive, doesn't really do much, as we discovered in other articles, and that which it does do only lasts up to 36 months. Devil's in the details. I'll bet you the addiction lasts longer than 36 months. I'm just saying. Tuff noted that the medical establishment, already bullish on the ADHD craze, seized upon the initial results of the multimodal Treatment of Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder Study. The study, published in 1999, suggested that Ritalin was effective. Now, we already know that it was researchers like James Swanson and Martine Hugman that were responsible for those results. After the Ritalin train left the station at full speed, James Swanson, who subsequently went to consult for drug companies, including the manufacturer of Adderall, and his colleagues, realized that their study championing stimulant use had aged poorly. Now, that's a very interesting choice of words by the author of this article. Their information aged poorly. In other words, the lie got discovered. It came out in the wash, is what this author is saying. While the children in their MTA study reported improvements after 14 months of choking down stimulants, after 36 months, their advantage had effectively disappeared, such that they were expressing the same supposed symptoms as the comparison group. In other words, the medicine just quit working. It just quit. The safety net under the patient was gone. Years later, the same test subjects turned out to be an inch shorter than their peers. Troubling, to say the least. In other words, the medical establishment was hyping and pushing addictive drugs largely on the basis of perceived short-term gains, but unlike drug dependency, faded in under 2 years. There are things about the way we do this work, Swanson, now in his 80s, told Tough, that are just definitely wrong. I don't agree with people who say that stimulant treatment is good, Swanson said. After spending 3 decades studying the drugs, it's just not good. Swanson is apparently not the only supposed ADHD expert now having significant doubts. You'll forgive me on this name. Edmund Sonuga Bark, a researcher of psychiatry and neuroscience at King's College London, told Tough, I've invested 35 years of my life trying to identify the causes of ADHD, and somehow we seem to be farther away from our goal than we were when we started. Now, I'm just going to inject a little bit of perspective, and this is only my opinion, but it seems to me you might be closer to your objective if you were pursuing the right things, rather than pursuing correct and healthy and effective treatment of the patient. You're pursuing monetary gain at the cost of the patient, and you're wondering why you're further away from your goal? I thought you were the educated one here. I thought you were the one who went to school to be smarter than this. There's a quote from him that says, we're terrified of what will happen to the kids who can't get the meds. Are we? Or are we teaching parents to be that way? Trap cat, stay down. Get down. Thank you. We have a clinical definition. Hold on. Not everything came up. We're just going to stop right there on this article. We'll pick up this article again later because Trap Cat's being an obnoxious piece of obnoxiousness. I want you to familiarize yourself with the language of this article thus far, folks. We're gonna dive into the second half of this article later today. I've got time constraints that I've got to follow, but I got tired of putting the second article off. There's so much in it that it's just. But let's sum up what we've learned so far. In conjunction, when you take the two articles, what you've heard of the second one thus far, you put them together, and what has been stated, is that leading researchers in the field years and years and years ago lied about their research and made a financial bed partnering decision with Big Pharma to push certain medications that are labeled as amphetamines on American youth, that not only didn't produce any real or lasting benefit, but in more cases than not made things worse. And now some of these researchers are having an attack of conscience, and for whatever reason, they're coming clean. Two things to say about that. Number one, bravo. Better late than never. Number two, watch y'all's back. It's motherfuckers like you that get to telling the truth that end up dying in fucked up ways. Watch y'all's backs, please, because somebody out there is not going to like what you're having to say. Me personally, I love it. You need to say more of it, and you need Swanson, Hoogman. Every researcher mentioned in these articles, open invitation for interviews, y'all. Trapcat is ready to do interviews. Stay tuned. We're going to cover more on this later.